For decades, Cadillac was considered the pinnacle of American luxury. Long, flowing, majestic exteriors and impeccable interior refinements were a hallmark of the brand. Cadillac was the stylish trendsetter all other makes followed. From elite executives to socialites and even royalty, Cadillac was the chariot of choice. Only a Cadillac signaled to everyone you had made it. Even during the turbulent 70s, Cadillac managed to maintain an aura of prestige and classic elegance. As government regulations and energy concerns steadily increased, Cadillac responded by skillfully reducing unnecessary weight while avoiding alienating its traditional customer base. Despite the downsizing, interiors remained roomy and first class. Even in the finer details, Cadillac was a step above, offering innovative technology, advanced electronics, and that traditional Cadillac elegance and sophistication. And then there was the Cimarron. In the history of automobiles, it has become one of the most sinister of words. Cadillac introduced the Cimarron as a new kind of Cadillac for a new kind of Cadillac owner. Traditional Cadillac owners were horrified and immediately stayed away in droves. So, what happened? European rivals were gaining major market share in the US luxury car market by the dawn of the 80s, and the average age of Cadillac owners was rapidly increasing. Preliminary design work for a fuel-efficient European-style Cadillac begun in early 1980. The Cimarron name was chosen from a list of alternatives that included J2000, Carmel, Cascade, Cavill, Envoy, and Series 62. The J-body platform featured compact dimensions and McPherson strut front-wheel drive. On paper, the compact front-wheel drive architecture seemed a suitable fit for an entry-level luxury car. However, GM's general manager, Pete Estes, cautioned Cadillac general manager Ed Kennard against rushing the development of Cimarron. Converting the J-car into a proper Cadillac would take time. The fear was having a Chevy Cavalier and a Cadillac sharing too many basic components and lowering brand image. Bowing to dealer demand and market conditions, Cadillac general manager Ed Kennard rushed the Cimarron into production for 1982. It turned out to be the shortest development cycle GM had ever undertaken, and the results did not impress. The handling was no match for European rivals, and the 1.8-liter carbureted engine produced a mere 88 horsepower. Though economical, the initial engine offering would leave a very poor first impression. It is true, however, that genuine effort was made to provide Cadillac levels of luxury to interior appointments. Quality leather surfaces and standard amenities such as air conditioning, power seats, and windows were featured. Initial reviews by auto journalists suggested using a calendar rather than a stopwatch to measure 0 to 60 times. A survey of owners revealed another complaint: the obvious similarity to other J-body cars. Other contemporary J-body offerings included the Buick Skyhawk, the Oldsmobile Forenza, the Pontiac J2000, and of course the Chevrolet Cavalier. So strong was the similarity, some owners insisted dealerships install additional Cadillac badges. In fact, initial literature and badging labeled the vehicle as Cimarron by Cadillac. Cadillac brochures featured all models except the Cimarron. It was the lone model to be featured in a separate brochure. GM quickly realized the American public was not impressed with the hastily birthed Cimarron. For 1983, engine displacement was increased from 1.8 to 2 liters, and fuel injection replaced carburation. Overall performance was marginally better thanks to the switch to fuel injection and the addition of a 5-speed manual transmission. Suspension revisions were also made, including revised strut valving and additional urethane components. Sales brochures featured images of a Cimarron turning corners. That was an attempt to convey a sporty European image. Minor interior revisions consisted of a center front armrest and new color and trim options. Through print ads, brochures, and TV spots, real effort was made to convince the buying public that Cimarron was a quality product. But the obvious parts sharing amongst other GM vehicles was just too obvious. Every imaginable feature was made standard to counteract initial shortcomings, but this made little difference and sales did not improve. Changes were minimal for the 1984 model year. Sales literature would seem to indicate the marketing folks were struggling to come up with genuinely unique selling points. Robots, gold keys, computers with laser beams, and trunk carpet are among the highlights in this brochure from 1984. Also mentioned is the gold key delivery system, which included 2 sets of gold keys, a gold key identification card, and a full tank of gas. A Dororo package was available that featured gold accents for the steering wheel spokes as well as body accent stripes. Available equipment included a pop-up VistaVent sunroof and Symphony Sound stereo. New push-button AC controls were standard. The big news for 1985 was the long overdue introduction of V6 power. The increase to 130 horsepower instantly made the Cimarron more competitive with intended rivals. Had this power plant existed at launch, the Cimarron legacy could have been far less infamous. Front-end styling was revised to be slightly more contemporary, and lengthened a few inches to better accommodate the new power plant. Despite these changes, annual sales numbers were still down. Part of the problem was Cadillac's reluctance to spend marketing efforts on the Cimarron. After all, by the mid-1980s, gas was cheap again. Cadillac clearly preferred to push more expensive models, and its average age of ownership continued a steep incline. Cimarron soldiered on into 1986 with virtually no changes, as its twilight years neared. Once again, sales literature featured such exciting details as advanced AC compressors and manual transmission upshift lights. The 2.0-liter 4-cylinder remained standard, and was suggested by the brochure for those who prefer miserly ways. Interior details remained unchanged, but that wasn't really a bad thing, as the seats and general ergonomics were fine. The quality of the leather upholstery in particular was one of the finer points of the Cimarron interior, and continued to receive praise. One of the few new additions for 1986 was the newly government-mandated center high-mount stop lamp. One of the more interesting features by this time was the availability of the electronic instrument cluster, which was way cooler if less practical than the standard gauge cluster. The automotive press universally hated electronic gauge clusters, and I personally blame them for the return to the boring gauge clusters in most models of the 90s. One other change of note for the 1986 model year was the transition to composite headlamps from sealed beam. There is actually quite a bit of confusion when identifying the 86 models, as some featured sealed beam headlamps, while others featured the newer composite style headlamps that would become standard the next year. The new headlamps and slightly revised front end finally infused Cimarron with a measure of distinction from its Cavalier platform mate, but it was a case of too little, too late, and sales remained stagnant. Yet again, Cimarron received very little attention in the way of upgrades or revisions for 1987. However, 1987 was the first year for Cimarron to finally be allowed to sit at the grown-up stable. It was featured in the full-line brochure for the first time. The brochure labeled Cimarron as the sporty spirit of Cadillac. Continued refinement of fit and finish and mechanical quality was evident, and the Cimarron surprised and impressed the few people who gave it a chance. The V6 power plant was made standard at last, as it should have been from day one. 1988 would mark the final year for the Cimarron. By now, Cimarron was a reasonably competitive offering, and most of the problems had been sorted out, so GM figured this was the perfect time to kill it. Realistically, this makes sense, however. The Cimarron name was permanently tarnished by one of the worst examples of product planning in automotive history. The connection to the rather blue-collar Chevrolet Cavalier remained all too apparent, and traditional Cadillac buyers chose to keep as much distance as possible. Had GM kept to the original plan of properly developing the Cimarron and delaying introduction until the mid-80s with the V6 engine as standard, the Cimarron legacy could have been very different. There is no one reason or person responsible for the fate of Cimarron. It was born of a perfect storm of market and economic pressures. Dealers were demanding a fuel-efficient European rival to combat the rapidly expanding European competition. The decision to rush the J-body-derived Cimarron into production resulted in a car that had little appeal to traditional Cadillac buyers, and even less so for European prospects. No matter how refined or improved in the end, Cimarron was still seen as a cavalier in Cadillac drag. In the end, it was a car no one wanted, not even Cadillac. The Cadillac brand deserved better. The loyal Cadillac customers deserved better. Automotive design has a rich history of talented individuals. From Harley Earl and his pioneering efforts to modernize transportation, to Chuck Jordan and his fusion of rocket-age details and soaring tail fins, automotive designers of the 70s and 80s shared this same passion to create cars that capture the imagination. These automotive designers deserve greater recognition of their efforts as they operated in the most challenging of circumstances. John Manoogian was Assistant Chief of Design for Cadillac during the Cimarron's development, and he provided the following statement. Personally, I was vocal in trying to articulate the futility of convincing customers that a Chevy could be turned into a Cadillac with limited design differentiation. I lost that argument. John has graciously provided his original Cimarron concept sketches for this video. They offer a fascinating glimpse into what could have been. As with most concept art, these sketches vary in their similarity to the final product. Some reveal variations on the established theme, and others reveal possible facelift details for future models that were never to be. John's concept art also reveals a passion to innovate and inspire, and to give a glimpse at what could have been.
the world.